Good morning. Today is Tuesday, August 25th. I am driving to work. It's like 4:30 in the morning. This weekend is Sinclair's baby shower. We're all excited about. I'm on my hour-long trek to work. Thought that I'd tell you guys a story. When I started making these videos, I told myself that I didn't want to talk about things from my past that I'm not proud of. Whoa! My truck is beeping at me. I'm in a company truck, and I got it has like a little thing that beeps at me if I drive too fast. I can't stay in the fast lane for very long. And the irony is that this last weekend I was driving around town doing, different errands and caught myself driving like way slower than I normally would drive because of this thing on this truck. I can only do, like 75. Anyways, so I decided I wasn't going to talk about stories of, the different scuffles that me and my brothers and cousins got into when we were kids, and or the different fist fights. I just don't think that is something to be bragged about. But I will say that there were a couple of times, my children got into scuffles, and it was really scary as a parent. I only know of one incident with Sinclair where she was little, she had got into it with some kids, and they jumped her. I don't remember all the specifics to the incident. I remember it happening and them coming to me about it, and I remember just being mortified, the idea of it, but not sure, in that particular situation, particularly how to handle it, because they were small children. They were like, if I remember correctly, I think Sinclair was like under 10 when the thing occurred. It was a bunch of little girls in a trailer park. I just remember just being like really beside myself, the idea of it, of her being put in that predicament, and just, being scared for her. Not that, I thought it was going to be a mortal situation, just the idea of her being under duress like that really bothered me. Later on, some years later, it happened with little Richie. I guess little Richie and Josh started playing football in the park with a bunch of other kids, and if something occurred, and I'm not really sure 100% where the falling out was. I just know that the boys came back, and apparently the two of them plus another little boy that was friends with Josh got jumped by all these kids in a park that they were playing football with. And again, I don't know all the situation. I do remember that I think I was at work that day, and like all this stuff happened before I got home, but I know there was a scenario where Sarah had went over to some little boy's house all pissed off, and the dad basically insulted her and talked crap to her, and then send her on her way. And she was super heated about that. I remember going to that kid's house, but nobody was there or something. it was such a long time ago. I'm trying to remember the specifics of that ordeal. I remember it happening. I remember, me being worried about, Richie being out in the neighborhood and, having more problems with his kids. He didn't go to school with them, so it wasn't a scenario where I had to worry about him, having problems at school, just when he was in the neighborhood playing. And he always had Josh with him. They Dusty was my neighbor at the time, so that always helps when there's more than one. It's because it's, I feel like it doesn't matter how many kids there are. You got your cousin with you, your brother, or you got a fighting chance. But anyways, so then the Ariana situation. Ariana and I were having a conversation, and she had, mentioned this specific thing that happened with her, which always stood out to me as what, Ariana there's some funny Ariana stories, some different things that she did. There's some funny Sinclair and Little Richie stories, and when they were little, things that they did. But as far as the funny Ariana stories goes, this is one of the funniest. When Ariana was little, this young kid who lived in my old neighborhood, who I knew, when he was a little kid, we used to play football out in the street, and him and his little brother would come out and play football with us. And I didn't really know him other than playing. He would shoot when we'd throw the ball around in the front yard. He'd come out and want to play ball with us. We would, play ball. But he, somebody told me that he had passed, and I was super bummed about it because he was a cool little kid, and they're saying that one of his friends choked him out and left him in the front yard, and his brother came to get him the next day. There's more to the story, but I heard that story, and I made the decision that I wanted to teach my children how to get out of a rear naked choke. It was important to me, and when I taught Ariana how to get out of a rear naked choke, I had to teach her how to apply a rear naked choke to get out of it. And that was where my mistake was made. And I was at a company party. It was like the end of the day. The kids were getting their face painted, wanted to get their face painted, but there was a long line around the block. And so now it was the end of the day, and the line had died down, and everybody was getting ready to leave. And so we went and got in line to get their faces painted. And my boss at the time comes up to me and tells me that his boss and him and one of the project managers were standing over by the bouncy house, and that his girlfriend had a daughter my daughter's age, and the two little girls were playing with a third little girl and on the bouncy house, and the three men were standing there talking, and the little girls were playing, and some little boy started messing with them, and the three little girls kept telling the boy to leave them alone, and he wouldn't. And he said that Ariana got mad, rushed the little boy, wrapped him up. Well, as she goes to wrap him up, the boy turns to get away, and she ends up hopping onto his back, clipping her legs around his waist, sinking in the rear naked choke, like hipping in and pulling him back and dropping onto her back, with him fully wrapped up in the rear naked choke and a body lock, and the little boy is screaming, "Help! Help! He's trying to kill me!" And Ariana's, desperately trying to choke this little boy out. They end up having to go in there and pull her off of him, and they were laughing. And he said that she had perfect form, and so as we're trying to leave, he stops me and tells me this story. And at the time, at that exact moment, I was mortified because, it wasn't just my boss, but it was my boss's boss, that had to pull her off of this. And then they're like, whose kid is this? Whose kid is this? And I think I was there doing the auction at that exact moment. So had my tickets, and I was, at the where they were auctioning off all the prizes. And I think Sinclair and Little Richie were there with me. And Ariana was in the bouncy house. But it's funny because Ariana ended up, if I remember correctly, choking out 3 little kids. Another little girl in the grocery store, and that little girl's mom almost whooped Ariana's mom's butt in the store. As a result, I don't remember who the 3rd kid was, but it's just ironic because the whole objective was to try to, help them protect themselves, and it had the opposite effect. Ariana used that information for bad instead of for good. I don't know. I just thought it was a funny story. Ariana had brought it up, and I thought that I should mention it. Yeah, Richie and Sinclair never, I didn't hear a lot of stories about them getting into too much fisticuffs growing up. I know there was an incident where they both got jumped individually at 2 different times, at 2 different ages. I don't remember hearing too many stories about them fighting, which is good because it's better, I guess. I know that they both were put in martial arts as young kids. Like most of everybody does some kind of YMCA karate growing up. It doesn't really equate to anything unless you stick to it. I know Eric Sinclair had, she had wanted to wrestle, and then I think Richie did too for a minute, but and then there was another time when we were in Tucson where I had paid for them to take martial arts at a school, which had this amazing program, but I got commitment from Sarah before I signed a contract, and then she renegotiated for, I don't know, they ended up not getting to do it. I ended up getting jacked on my credit as a result, because I still had to pay for it for a year. I take it back. I think they let me out of my responsibility, but I ended up going there myself for months and months. I think it's important. I think that it helps with the child's development, even if, hopefully they live their whole lives and never have to defend themselves. Even if you look at it in a manner of just the exercise and the self-confidence and the ability to, think through your problems, and the want to hurt somebody. All of these go along with learning martial arts when you're a kid. For most kids, I think it's important that kids, have these experiences. Even still, I had done Muay Thai for a while, and I tried to put all the kids in Muay Thai. Sinclair was in Tucson at the time, but I had paid for Little Richie and Seabass. Seabass was too young at the time, but Ariana also, for all of them to take Muay Thai with me, and they just, I don't know, but everybody just was too busy. They would come a couple times and then not come, and it was expensive. And eventually everybody just fizzled out, and it was just me. So, and then I got hurt and had to stop, and so I was boxing with Cheyenne and Seth, and I was trying to get Ariana to do it too, and she said she would, but she couldn't fall through. And I don't know. I just personally, it's my opinion that children should absolutely have some kind of time in something, whether it be particularly wrestling. I heard an amazing stat actually yesterday. I was listening to Mr. Ballin on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking about the teams and the SEALs, and they were saying that the two sports that kids play, that those athletes have the easiest time getting through the one of the most, grueling processes in the military were wrestlers and water polo players. Had a different mentality, had a different mindset, and could push themselves further. And it's just something that you learn, that you pick up from, just imprints on you from doing these activities as a young kid. I highly recommend, if you have small children, to start them young in something. It doesn't have to be violent. There's no punches or kicks in judo. Judo's a good one, and it's a federation, so it's not like you're paying some knucklehead to teach your kid Rex Kwon Do for $150 a month. In judo, you pay dues. You don't pay. It's different than a normal, everyday martial art. And then if your kid decides to wrestle later, it will give them an advantage. Judo is a great complement to wrestling. Jiu-jitsu is expensive these days, but there really is no substitute. That seems to be hands down. If you want your kid to be a stone cold strangler, put them in jiu-jitsu in a young age. I don't know. It's really your preference. I personally don't believe in MMA. I think that all the UFC champions, all the elites, have always had a base in something. They wrestled. They were jiu-jitsu practitioners. They had a black belt. They spent their time in something and then picked up the rest of the stuff. The last thing you want, like I said, is to be taught Rex Kwon Do from some knucklehead. So unfortunately, there always has been a lot of that going on. It wasn't until the UFC came out that a lot of that stuff got exposed. But like I said, if you have small kids, I highly recommend it. If you have questions, or if you want to get pointed in the right direction, something that you're interested in, but you never did it yourself, so you don't know where to start, there's a lot of wrestling clubs around the valley. I know of a couple I would highly recommend. There are a lot of good Gracie schools around the valley. My niece and nephew train boxers. That's always a good one. It's a good workout on top of that knowledge that you'll have for the rest of your life, how to throw a punch. That's another thing that I always say, that I always tell people is, if you join a gym and you pay that money every month and you go, regularly like you're supposed to, for 3 years, and you put in the time, you'll get fit, you'll put on muscle. After 3 years, you'll look good and you'll feel good. But if you stop going, after 3 years, you lose it. You only have remnants of what you once built, and it's gone. You got to start all over from scratch. But if you take boxing or jiu-jitsu or even judo or any kind of martial arts or combat sport, you do that for 3 years, you gain a wealth of knowledge. And let's say you are in a position where you can no longer go and you have to stop. 3 years later, you still own that. You still have that. It's something you take with you forever. You'll always know how to throw a punch. You'll always know how to, throw a kick or take somebody down or choke somebody out or whatever that is. And you still get that health benefit. You actually get something more. You get, there's something you get from these combat sports that you can't get anywhere else. This confidence, this sense of no matter what happens in the world, no matter what happens around you, you are safe because you can defend yourself. I don't know. It's always been my thought. It makes sense to me. But again, like I said, if you're curious and you have questions, feel free to reach out. I'm not opposed to answering questions. I don't know everything, but I know some things, and I know people that if I can't answer the question, they probably can. And then of course, there's always just Google, your local wrestling club or your local jiu-jitsu school. But I recommend doing something, especially if you're like trying to lose weight or you just want to get in shape or, you just got an inheritance and have money to throw away. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. Anyways, always be in Christ. Have a great day.